Hello and welcome to Cool Shark Racing. Today we've got another video and today we've got some tips and tricks for getting used to ACC. So when you first start playing ACC coming from Project Cars 2 or other sims, you'll notice that the steering can be very sensitive and the cars seem to just want to spin very easily, even in little slides and things like that. So today I'm going to show you some wheel settings, car selection and things like that to try and get used to the physics of ACC. So now you're on the main menu, you've just launched ACC. One of the first things I would do is go and set up your audio and your wheel. So we just go across to options, and I'm just going to show you my audio settings here. Now, as a general idea, what you basically want is you want your tyres to be one of the louder volumes, and that means that you can hear when you have grip and when you don't. That can help you with car control because you know what's going on. So you can see here, also a good thing for when you start racing is to make sure that your spotter is on. You'll see that near the bottom there, to make sure that is set to on. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our controls and set up our wheel. This is going to completely vary based on whatever wheel you have. I currently have a Thrustmaster TX with the F1 wheel add-on, and I'm going to show you what my wheel settings are for this wheel. However, if you have a different wheel, there are lots of videos on YouTube on wheel settings for lots of different wheels. So today I'm going to show you what wheel settings I've got for my Thrustmaster TX. So opening up controller settings here now. So this is for my steering wheel. So the first thing we're going to notice is the force feedback. This is what we're obviously going to focus on. So the very first thing is our gain. So this is what I've got it set to for my Thrustmaster TX. Like I say, it will vary based on what your wheel is and what you're comfortable with. So the first thing, like I said, is your gain. So that's like your force feedback strength. I personally have that at 70 to maybe 80% to try and give me a lot more force feedback, because I find the force feedback quite low on ACC. The next thing we have is minimum force. I'm not exactly sure what this does, so I've just got that at 0% right now. The other thing is dynamic damping. So I looked at a few different wheel settings when I was setting this up, and I found that 100% is kind of an okay setting for you there. The next thing is road effects, and I noticed a few different settings that said to kind of keep it around like 10 to 20%, I think. So I've got mine personally set to 15%. The next is going to be your advanced settings. So the very first thing we're going to see in your advanced settings is the steering lock. Now this varies based on each different car in the game. So in the description I'm going to link the correct steering lock for each car. Each car has a different one. So for the Bentley that I usually drive, the steering lock is 640 degrees. So to get my gaming wheel to match the in-game wheel, I want the steering lock to be set to 640 degrees. So your next thing you're going to want to look at is your steering scale. This is a lot of personal preference. I personally found that 55% was a good setting for my driving style. Basically, how I understand it as, the lower it is, the less sensitive it is. On the right, we also have our control bindings. So you can bind different buttons based on your wheel to whatever you need them for. I wanted to mention a quick tip that I use for my Thrustmaster TX wheel, and this is manually adjusting the angle of rotation. So if you notice with the wheel, if I've done nothing to it, the wheel will go all the way around like that. And if you're coming to a corner, doing this and then this for chicanes or things like that, it's going to take you a lot longer and it's a lot harder to control the car, I personally found. Now, if you hold your mode button on the left and your D-pad left, it will decrease the angle of rotation. So there's 4 flashes, so 4 different settings. So the first one here, if you do it once, we see we have 3 green flashes and the wheel is now set to that. Now, I personally set it to 2 flashes. I find this means I can turn the wheel a lot quicker and things like that. So you can see with 2 flashes, the wheel now only goes this amount of steering. I find this very helpful for lots of different sims that I race on. So the next thing, now that we have set up our wheel, we really want to go and start practicing. So the first thing we're going to do is to go to single player, and I would recommend starting with just either hot lap or some offline racing. Hot lap is really good for getting used to the settings. The next thing we want to do is we want to select our track. Now, if you've played other sims like Project Cars or any other sims, have a look for a track that you know quite well in other sims. That'll help you to more focus on getting used to the car and the physics instead of trying to learn a new track. The next thing we really want to have a look at and pick is our car. Now, when you first start ACC, picking a car that is good for beginners is a really crucial step to learning the physics. To select the car, we want to simply press on the car in single player. That'll bring up the car menu options. So here we can customize our cars, our liveries, and we can also pick a different car. So if you are on the base version of ACC and you don't have any DLC, well then you're going to have to start with a GT3 car. I would personally recommend for starting out to either start with cars like the Lexus, which is really good for curbs. It's quite forgiving. If you take too much curb or things like that, it's not going to fling you across the other side of the track. Another car I would recommend is the Bentley, which we've got here, and also the Audi R8. Those are some good cars for starting out. It's all about personal preference though, as to what car you'd like to start with. If you have the Season Pass or the GT4 pack, you'll have access to the GT4 cars. So if you just started in the game and you already have the DLCs, I would recommend starting with the GT4 car to learn the physics of the game, because the GT4 cars are obviously a lot easier to control. So to select the GT4 class, simply go into your menu here for single player, and then we just want to go up to GT4, press on GT4, and that will bring us up with the GT4 cars. So one car that I personally use for GT4 is Mercedes AMG. There's lots of different GT4 cars, as I said though. Here are a few different ones that you can see here. So now, after we've started our first hot lap session, we want to check that our wheel is set up correctly. We can now, in hot lap mode, we can see our car's in-game wheel. and we can see our wheel here. So what we want to make sure is that as we turn our wheel, that both the in-game wheel and our wheel match. So as you can see, they match up pretty well there. So that means that we've got the correct steering ratio. Excuse my terrible noises by my wheel. So now that we have our steering lock all set up, we're pretty much ready to drive. So if after all that your car is still really sensitive, we can go into the car setup and adjust our steering ratio. Now I'd recommend after you get used to the physics to put this back down so that the car is a lot more responsive. But when you're first starting out, putting up the steering ratio can make the car a lot less sensitive to steering inputs. So simply go across to setup, press on current setup. It doesn't matter if you're in your wet, safe or aggressive setup to do this, just simply press current setup. We then want to go across to mechanical grip. Simply press RB until we find the mechanical grip. So what we want to do is we want to press on this top front section. We can now go down to the steering ratio. So the default for most cars is 12. However, when I started, I actually put this up to around about 15. So the car is a lot less sensitive to your steering inputs, but also means it's easier to correct your slides and also to stay in control of your car. So when you're first starting out, I'd recommend having your steering ratio a little bit higher, and then once you feel you're comfortable with the car and your steering and things like that and the physics, then put it back down to 12 or wherever you feel comfortable with. So after everything's all set up, you've had a few laps and things like that, you'll probably want to have a look at a good setup, as that can also help with the car's control and things like that as well. So you can buy setups from different places. I believe Coach Dave and things like that sell some setups, but if you're on console especially, you can also go onto YouTube, search ACC, search your car, and then the track, and then a setup, and that will often bring up some setups and also some hot laps, so you can actually see what some of the faster drivers are doing. The other thing I would recommend is going and watching a few track guides. These are really helpful when you're first getting used to the game to know what curbs and braking points to use with these cars. Simply go onto YouTube, just search ACC, for example, Rap Nürburgring, so ACC Nürburgring track guide, and you should be able to find a good few track guides or hot laps to show you where to brake and things like that. I am going to link a few videos in the description below from other YouTubers about how to actually get fast on ACC. This is more of a guide to just get used to the physics of the game, because it is a lot different, I found, to some of the other sims that I've played on. So go and have a look in the description for some of those other videos and how to actually get quick at ACC. But I really hope that this helped you get used to the game and that you're enjoying ACC, because it is a really good sim once everything is set up. So I forgot to mention that if you're on controller, I'll link a video in the description about controller settings, because I know a few of you will be using controller, and ACC can be quite a hard sim compared to some of the others, so having good controller settings will really help. So I'll link that video in the description below. Thanks again for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe,